Welcome back to this series where we're exploring the many possibilities of this amazing machine, the Slaleor Espresso Single Group. Today, we're going to be really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with this machine, brewing a drink which is closer to filter coffee in style than it is to espresso, but it's simple, highly repeatable, and extremely delicious. Inspired by the Spro Over or the Spro Over, we're calling this one the Slaleor Spro Over. So the idea behind this video is to create something completely different to what we've created so far in this series, where we've made the Slaleor shot, the reverse Slaleor shot, and the 15-15-15. The end result of this is much more like filter coffee, and what we're doing is taking inspiration from the Spro Over or the Spro Over, whichever you prefer, and we're going to be really harnessing the power of this machine to give you the very precise levels of control so you can get exactly the results you're looking for, and the very accurate flow rates that Slaleor is known for. As with all the recipes in this series, this is very much a starting point. You can take this, change it, tweak it, maybe even reverse it, pun intended, and you can get very different results just by tweaking slight variables, which the Slaleor gives you so much control over. So I'll show you exactly how I make this style of drink using this machine in a few minutes, but in the meantime, we need to make a few changes to the setup of the machine because it's configured slightly differently to how we did in the first videos. The first three videos in this series, the Slaleor shot, the reverse Slaleor shot, and the 15-15-15 were intentionally bunched together, not only because they cover a huge spectrum of styles of coffee that they work really nicely with and give you very different results, but also because the machine settings that you use were exactly the same. I'm calling this configuration 1, and what I mean by this is a pump pressure of 9 bar, which in our full brew position 2, was delivering 9 grams of water per second. And then in position 1, our restricted flow rate, which is restricted by the needle valve, this was delivering around 1.67 grams per second, both of which when there's no puck providing any resistance. For the next few videos, I'm going to show you a slightly new configuration, which I'm calling configuration 2. And this is slightly different, but very easy to set up. So the first thing we want to do is adjust our pump pressure to 6 bar. This can easily be done by first removing the cup tray, carefully unscrewing the back panel and placing it to one side, being very careful not to pull on the ribbon cable. After this, you want to insert a blank basket into your portafilter and actuate into our full brew position 2. Once you understand the pump pressure, you can adjust this at the pump using a small screwdriver, actuating into position 2 with that blank basket until the pressure gauge reads around 7 bar, which should equate to a maximum of 6 bar with resistance from a bed of coffee, which will obviously be lower. Once this is set, your machine will be dispensing water in position 2 at around about 7.5 grams per second, which you can check just by weighing the amount of water dispensed in 30 seconds and dividing it by 30. This should give you a total of around about 225 grams after 30 seconds, which is what we got here. Understanding this flow rate is actually really important because in the first phase of brewing our Spro Over, we want to saturate our puck using our full unrestricted flow rate. So understanding this, along with another technique, which I'll talk about in a second, gives us lots of confidence that we're gonna dispense exactly the amount of water we intend to for our blooming phase, which is gonna be 45 grams. So 7.5 grams per second. Do this for 6 seconds, you should get 45 grams. And the other benefit of this is it's gonna be 3 times the dose we're working with, which is gonna be 15 grams. So 1 to 3, this is a really standard blooming ratio. We can be very precise with our flow rate, our timings, and that's gonna really help us be very consistent and repeatable. Once our pressure's set, we can set our restricted flow rate, which is gonna be found in position 1. And for this, in configuration 2, I like to go with 4 grams per second, which is much higher than we found in the configuration 1. You can set this flow rate using the needle valve, and it's equivalent to dispensing 120 grams of water in 30 seconds. The reason for choosing 4 grams per second for what I call the pour phase, which is the majority of the extraction, is that it's inspired by many brewers who like to use a pouring speed of 4 grams per second. But obviously you can increase this, you can decrease this, find what works for you, and follow your own preferences. Temperature-wise, I've got my machine set to 94 degrees, and although this might sound like the same temperature you might use for a kettle, because this machine is very temperature stable, it's gonna keep that temperature throughout the entire duration of the brew, whereas a kettle, particularly if you take it off the base, is gonna lose temperature over time. And because of that, you might wanna slightly decrease the temperature of the machine if you prefer. I quite like this 94 degrees because it's a very efficient way of brewing, particularly with lighter roast coffees. You can get very high extractions, but if you're using a darker roast coffee, if you prefer a lower temperature generally, bring it down, experiment, and that's the whole fun of these things. You can do whatever you want. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. If you enjoy it, then I consider it's right. So now the machine's set to what I'm calling configuration 2, we can start prepping up our Slayer Spro Over. So one step that's completely optional, and if you prefer to add it, do. If you don't want to, completely fine, is to add a filter paper underneath our coffee in the base of our basket. And I just find this adds a little bit more clarity to the shots. I like it. Test with, test without, see which you prefer, and then go with that. When it comes to our basket, I like to go for as big of a basket as I can get my hands on. This is actually a 28 gram basket. It's a Weber uni basket. And when we're only adding 15 grams of ground coffee to this, obviously there's gonna be a fair bit of headroom there, which is very much intentional. So I do recommend distributing the coffee just to promote as even an extraction as possible. And then I do like to go for a light tamp here, but I actually don't apply pressure myself. I just use the weight of a tamper, which for all the tampers I have at least is around 400 grams, give or take, just to evenly compress the bed without adding too much resistance. And then optional, once again, I like a puck screen on top. And the goal of this is to as evenly distribute the water across the bed of coffee as possible, which I find this really helps with. But again, test with, test without, see which you prefer and go with that. So the idea behind leaving as much headroom here as possible, using a bigger basket and a low dose, is that in that saturation phase at the very start of this process, which is equivalent to a bloom in a manual pour over, we can be fairly confident that full 45 grams of water that we're aiming for in our blooming period is going to be delivered, because in that 6 seconds it should fill the headspace, start saturating the puck, but not get too much resistance from the coffee, which could impact that flow rate. So now I'm going to start brewing our coffee, which is a red honey processed geisha from Costa Rica. Lots of floral notes in there, some tropical characteristics, and some kind of raspberry flavors. Very delicious. But choose any coffee that you enjoy as a filter coffee, and it should work really nicely here as well. So just gonna quickly purge our group. And then we can start our 6-second saturation period, starting our scales at the same time, and moving into our full brew position. So you'll see we are fully saturated. What we're gonna do now is just hold this like you would with the bloom. I'm gonna hold until my scales reach 30 seconds, but you could extend this, particularly if you've got a lighter roast coffee or a very fresh roast. You might see the first drips here in the same way you might with the manual bloom, but that's totally fine. So now I'm gonna move into our pour phase, which is that restricted flow rate, restricted by the needle valve. And we're gonna run this today until we reach a yield of 200 grams. You can obviously play around with all different kinds of dose to yield ratios. You'll often see people go for a 1 to 10 dose to yield ratio for a Spro Over, but I'm gonna go a little bit longer than that today. I wanna get a little bit closer to a more classic filter strength, but as always, you can experiment with this. And one thing to note here is that because this is what's known as a no bypass brew method, this is a really efficient way of extracting. The water coming through has nowhere to go except through that bed of coffee, meaning we often reach very high extraction percentages, 21.5% up to 24% depending on the coffee. So if you want to mimic the small amount of water that bypasses the coffee in a manual pour over, you can always add a little bit of water here to dilute the end result to your own taste. I do like a slightly stronger filter anyway, so today we're going to stop at 200 grams for this coffee, but you can go shorter, you can go longer, it's completely up to you. So this ran in just shy of 90 seconds, which is my general starting point when it comes from start to finish, the total contact time. Again, you can adjust your grind to go for a slightly longer or shorter total contact time, but whatever you go for, this is going to give a really interesting version of the coffee, which now we can give a taste. So cheers. This is a delicious coffee, and this is an amazing expression of it. Loads of fruit character, incredible clarity, considering there is pressure involved. Everything I've ever enjoyed about this coffee is in here in bags. It's reasonably high intensity for something comparable to filter, but as I said, you could reduce this down. For me, that's about perfect. I quite like a strong filter. And just like all the other videos in this series, there's so much you can do with it. So you can experiment with a different flow rate in the machine, extending or shortening that bloom phase like I spoke about before. You can change the brew temperature, puck screen, no puck screen, filter, no filter. The list goes on. There's so many things you can do with this. I think this really shows the versatility of this amazing machine. And if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel by clicking here so you don't miss any future content. And you can also watch this video, which I really hope you enjoy. So thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and cheers.